All right, let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, so far we spoke about HL7, right? We understood the structure of the HL7 message, and we understood what are the various message types that we have, and looked at structure of each of those message types. And we also did talk about data types and their importance. Now, we have to go ahead and start practically looking at how to implement an HL7 interface or develop an HL7 interface from scratch. So as a prerequisite, there are a couple of things that we need to understand because HL7 message comes into play whenever we need to transact data from one system to another, right? So that's the base logic, or that's the base where HL7 uh, can be transacted between two different systems. If there is no transaction, then there is no need for having HL7 message at all. So at the end of the day, a transaction has to happen, which is to send message from one system to another. Now, how we can send the data from one system to another? So there are many multiple ways. In terms of networking, we can see that there are many different methodologies which you can go with in order to implement an interface and transact HL7 message from one system to another. So being integration developers, it is necessary for us to know what are the various connection models that we have, which we can implement in our real-time implementations, and also little bit troubleshooting here and there, especially with respect to TCP/IP, so that we know what are the concepts or how do we rule out that this is not an issue or something else is an issue. So we'll go ahead and take a look at those factors. We'll see what all connection models that we have. We'll also see a little bit deeper into TCP/IP so that we can understand that better, because that's one of the most frequently used connection models. So the first one that we have is folder connectivity. So in folder connectivity, what you do is you will have two different servers, server 1 and server 2. You'll pick up the data from server 1 from a specified shared folder, and then move the data or write the data to the server 2, and that's also a shared folder. Usually this approach is taken for servers which are within the same network, like within the same hospital, within the same lab, within the same environment and all. But when you jump onto the outside network, this particular interface is not possible and not secure as well. Let's say you have an hospital and there is a lab outside the hospital network. Then if you have to implement an interface, you have to go with VPN, TCP/IP and all, and not this approach. Shared folder to shared folder connectivity cannot be done there. Reason being, security is one of the major aspect, and there are many other things. Not recommended by HL7 to have a transaction between two different networks altogether this way. Second protocol that we have is TCP/IP. TCP stands for Transfer Control Protocol or Internet Protocol. So protocol, what do you mean by protocol? Protocols are nothing but list of instructions or rules that we have to follow. So these protocols are formed by the Internet Protocol Committee, where they say that this is how you have to transact data for TCP/IP related transactions. So before we jump into that, we need to understand few basic terms. So few of us are freshers, may not be aware of these networking terms. If you're aware, then well and good. If not, then let's go through them so that you guys can get an idea. So let's see what is a LAN. LAN is local area network. So let's assume that there is a building. Within that building, there are 10 different or 20 different systems, right from ground floor to the top floor. Now, all of these systems can be interconnected with each other and have a communication enabled between these different systems altogether. How they are interconnected with each other? You may take the support of Ethernet cables, routers, switches. A router is a device which we use at our home. Switch is a device which is similar to router, but does a little higher purpose than what router does. Okay, so using these devices, cables and all the systems will be interconnected with each other. Okay, and they can communicate with each other and they form a network called local area network. It is local area network because it is within the same building or same premises. Next, we have wide area network. Now, let's take the same scenario, previous scenario, where you have one building, there are 10, 20 different systems which are interconnected with each other. Replicate this to 6 or 7 other buildings, each lying half-kilometer distance apart or 1 kilometer distance apart. Every local area network connection are interconnected with each other to form this wide area network. Okay, 5 buildings, each building has their own local area network, and there is a cable running through which is connecting all different 5 buildings. Then that forms a wide area network because we are expanding the network beyond one local area network and interconnecting all the different local area networks with each other, right? So that's called wide area network. And wide area networks are interconnected with each other to form the web of internet. So the internet that we have today is nothing but a combination of LANs and WANs interconnected with each other to form a web, kind of spider web, right? So that's how we are able to form the internet and communicate or exchange data between any systems or any different entities altogether. Now let us talk about virtual private network. So what is virtual private network? So as you can see in this picture, virtual private network is a VPN tunnel. Um, VPN stands for virtual private network. Basically, it is a tunnel which will enable a private communication between you and your entity. For example, I mean, in these days, we are hearing a lot about virtual private network, right? I mean, since COVID started, since that point, we heard a lot about VPN. There were many people who weren't aware much about VPN before that, but after that, they did. So, what VPN is? VPN is a tunnel. Now, when you connect to a VPN, it will establish this secure tunnel between your system and your office system. And it will make you feel that you are in the office. Reason being, you are connected to office network through this tunnel. Let's say there are few portals and all which can be opened only when you are in office. But when you are at home, you won't be able to open that. And if you want to access them, then how? And that's where this thing comes into play. VPN will help you to enable that secure communication so that no one will be able to uh, get into that tunnel and steal the transaction or the data that you're transferring between you and your office. Okay. Next, we have, let's see few terms. Number one is IP address. So if you look at IP address is nothing but Internet Protocol address. So every house they have their own address, right? And that will help us to uniquely identify each and every house using their house number. In the same way, every device that is connected to network will have a unique IP address. And this will help us to identify that device on the network. It's not just system or um, laptop or system, any electronic device that is connected to the network. It may be a printer, it may be a mobile device, it may be a gaming device, anything that gets connected to the network will definitely have an IP address assigned to it. Next, you have port. So what is a port number? Port number are kind of doors and windows to a house. So through doors and windows, you enter and exit the house, right? We have seen IP address, which is like house number. Now, doors, ports, and windows are nothing but which will help us to enter and exit out of the house. Similarly, every system has ports. Now, there are two kinds of ports. One is hardware port and software port. Hardware ports are the ones that you can see and feel. The Ethernet port, the USB port, the HDMI port. These are hardware ports. So they enable communication of data inside and outside of the system through these ports, through these hardware ports. I would say we have virtual ports as well, or software ports, you can say. Software or virtual ports are nothing but ports that cannot be seen. Once the data is entering into the system through the Ethernet port, there will be many different, many software or virtual ports that you can use to transact data to specific applications. Now, once the data is in the system, the data has to go to one or the other application that is running on the system, right? So each application can listen on a dedicated port number so that the message can be routed to that specific port number only. Those are called as software ports. So how many software ports we have? We have around 65,000 plus software ports, so you can choose any one of them. I would recommend stick to anything above 5,000. Not that you cannot use below 5,000. There are a few dedicated ports that will be used by Windows system itself. So that's the reason it's better to always choose a port number which is greater than 5,000. Now that we understood what are few networking things, let us talk about few networking commands. Now I told you that we have an IP address assigned to every system, right? So let's take a look at how to find that IP address. So what you can do, go to start, type cmd, which is our command prompt, and that will take you to this window. This is our command prompt window. Okay. Here you can type as ipconfig, which stands for IP configuration. And as soon as you type ipconfig, you will have a lot of things showing up here, right? IPv4 address, IPv6 address, and all. Right. If you look at IPv4 address, you can see that it says 192.168.40.1. So this is the IP address of my system. Just give me 1 minute, guys. Hey, sorry guys. So as you can see, IPv4 address is the actual version 4 address of internet protocol. So there are two things. V6 is the one that is going to come in the future. So as you can see here, this says V6. Now in my system, it is showing a lot because I have few VMwares installed. I have wireless LAN, I have Ethernet adapter and everything. That's the reason you are seeing many IPv4 addresses. But in your system, if you don't have VMs and all, then you will just see a primary wireless LAN adapter, and then you will see an Ethernet adapter. Currently, I don't have any Ethernet cable connected to my laptop. That is the reason you are not seeing any Ethernet adapter address here. But I am connected to Wi-Fi, and that's where you will see what is the IP address of the system. Oh, sorry, this one. Yeah. All right. Next, we will see how to find out the status of a port number. Now, I told you we can choose from list of 65,000 port numbers and then assign that port number to our interface, right? So how to check that port number? You can use this command called network statistics. Netstat, which stands for network statistics, -an, give a pipe symbol and find string. Then you can type any port number. For example, I'll type 1433. So this port number is dedicated for the SQL server. The Microsoft SQL Server uses 1433 as a default port number. So now the moment I entered it, you can see that it says 1433. And you see there are a lot of connections that are enabled, right? And they are running. So basically, I think my Mirth is running and picking up the data. Let me quickly check. Yeah, but anyway, we can see that we have a lot of connections established. So if a port is being used in real time, then you will see this situation where you will have listening established and all. And in case if a port is not listening, let us change the port number to 1434. Now there you can see that we don't have any response. It is blank. When something is blank, it means that the port number is not being used anymore, right? Which means you can go ahead and use that port number for your implementation. So in that way, we can make a choice of which port number to go ahead and use. All right. Next, let us take a look at a couple of troubleshooting steps. How do you determine whether a system is working or not, or whether the connection between your system and the destination system is working or not? So this is one of the most common troubleshooting steps that we perform. Okay. In real time, when we want to pick up the data and send from one system to another, this is one of the common practices that we do. If you are unable to send the data to the system. So how do you find out that it is not working? So when you try to send a message to destination system, you won't be able to get a response back, or you won't be able to connect to the destination system, and the message cannot be delivered. So in that scenario, what do? We go ahead and run 2 or 3 commands to determine what is the status of the connection. So first out of them is to go ahead and run a ping command. So when you perform a ping command can be executed either on IP address or on um, web address as well. For example, I'll type google.com, right? So you can see that when I pinged google.com, it did ping google.com. So that's the IP address that it has right now. And we are getting a response from that. So what does ping mean? Let's say that you are in a huge ground, there is a wall, and there is complete fog. You cannot see whether there is a wall or not. So if you throw a ball onto that wall, you will get that ball back, right? And that way you can determine that there is some sort of obstacle there. If there is no wall, then it will go in vain. You will be able to, you won't be getting the ball back, right? Pinging is something like that. You send few packets from your system to the designated IP address, and the if the destination system is available, it will reply back those packets to you, stating that yes, these are I have received them, and these are I'm sending them back. So you can see here by looking at the packets, you can determine whether the connection is 100% or not. And here we see that it says sent 4, received 4, lost 0, which means the communication is 100% successful. Okay. Next, once you do that, if you're still unable to connect to the destination system, then there is further problem um, to the way you are getting connected to the destination server. Or the immediate next thing that we check is the port number, whether we are able to connect on certain port number or not. Okay, if pinging is there, then it means that we are able to establish a connection with the destination server. So that's not a problem. What is the next level of the problem that we may have once the pinging is done? We connect to the server, destination server through IP, and then we will connect on a port number. So the next step is to check the port number, whether we are able to connect on the port number or not. So how do you determine that? So for determining that, you use you use a command called telnet. You use telnet, google.com, and port number. So 443 is a dedicated port number for all the secure connections. So any website uses this port number only, in most of the cases. Now, when I type the IP address and port number and hit enter, now I am connected to Google server. Okay, when you enter this blank screen in when you run a telnet command, it means that you are connected to the Google server. If you do not connect, or if you are unable to connect, then immediately it will shoot up an error there and there itself, stating that you are unable to connect to the server. So I did exit that. So let's do the same thing again. 448. I'm using a different port number. 448 is not an open port from their side and from our side as well. Let's go ahead and run it. Now it is trying to connect to google.com on port number 448. But as port number 448 is not a working port, we will not be able to connect. After a little while, it will shoot an error stating that we are unable to connect to the server. All right, we'll leave that, but we'll get an error in some time. So why do we get an error when connecting to a port number? So you can see that connecting to host could not open connection to the host on port 448, connection failed. Right? So that's how you determine or segregate whether the issue with the entire connection or whether the issue with a certain port number. Okay. And then we can reach out to, after that, you can reach out to the network team stating that, you know what, I did a ping and this is the status of the ping. You did a telnet and this is the status of the telnet, and we are unable to connect to the server. Then networking team will jump into play. They will go ahead and see how the packets are being routed. They will trace the connections. They will check the rules. They will do a lot of stuff, which we are not very well aware of, but they will be able to figure out where the problem is. All right. And then solve that issue. One of the most common things is firewall blockage on either sides. What is firewall, first of all? Let's see that. So when you are connecting to internet, in order to protect your internal network from the external world and threats and all, there will be a wall between your internal network and internet. And this wall will help you to manage all of your port numbers, connections that are incoming and all. So what usually business people would do is they will block all the port numbers, and based on a need, they will open a certain port number. So now in our case, we were talking about 448, right? 448 and all the other, let's assume that this is Google and this is myself. Internet is myself. I tried to go ahead and connect to Google. Currently, only 443 port number is open on this particular firewall. That's how Google let me in, because that is the common port number that is used for the website. Now, when I use 448, that port is blocked here. So my connection was interrupted here itself. I requested and I couldn't open, the connection couldn't open. So I got a response stating that connection could not open. Right? That's what firewall does. So most of the times, if you are able to ping and cannot telnet, then it's most of the times it's a firewall blockage of that particular port number itself and can be resolved quickly. If not, we may see other issues, intermediary issues like we saw this, right? We did a ping. We are seeing that we have responses. So usually when you do a ping, you send 4 packets and receive 4 packets. In few cases, you may receive only 2 packets. So loss is considered as 50%. That is something little bit serious and dangerous, because it is a half transaction that is happening, right? So what happens? You send 4 packets. Two packets are dropped middle in the middle somewhere. We don't know where, and rest of the 2 packets are returned. So which means there is a data loss in transit. Okay. So if data is lost, then we have to, I mean, networking team has to troubleshoot to figure out why there is a loss in data. So there are many other commands that you can use to see all the list of port numbers, and there are many various ways. So you can definitely go ahead and explore more on what are the various commands that we have. Any questions about TCP/IP before we jump on to FTP? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So let's jump on to the next connection model, which is FTP or SFTP. FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. SFTP stands for Secure File Transfer Protocol. So Secure File Transfer Protocol is the one that we'll use in real-time implementations. So because that is secure, and but not FTP. FTP is open. Anyone can connect to an FTP server. So what is an FTP server? An FTP server is basically a server that is used, hosted by some organization or body, and they will share that server with, or share the space, or lend the space, not share the space, but lend the space to other entities. Now this is same like folder to folder connectivity, but the only thing is, in folder to folder connectivity, you will have server A, server B. Here you will have some third party entity who is guarding everything. So what happens is, in an FTP server situation, there will be a third party FTP server. If client 1 wants to connect to FTP server, they will be given a dedicated space. Let's say that client 1 want to send data to client 3, they will send it through this FTP server. So client 1 will be given his own credentials to log into FTP server, drop the file there on a shared folder in an FTP server. Client 3 will also be given access to that with a different username and port number, but to the same folder. So he will go ahead and grab the data from that particular folder. Okay, as simple as that. So it is just that there is an intermediary server called FTP server, which will help us to transact data from client 1 to client 3. Next, you have web services. So web service is also a connection model that we can use in Mirth Connect. So I usually cover this in detail in Fire, but in terms of HL7, we are not going to use this, but I'll give you an overview of how you can use web services. So there are two protocols that we can use, SOAP or RESTful. So both are famous. RESTful is latest in the young lad to the group, whereas SOAP is the old methodology. So the difference between both of them is you can call, you can use only XML in SOAP, but you can use XML and JSON objects, both of them in RESTful. Both of them use HTTP protocols only, which means you are going to transact data through URLs, HTTP URLs, which will secure the data between your system and the destination REST API or SOAP API. There will be a debate usually that SOAP is better, RESTful is not, RESTful is may not be secure and all, but those days are slowly going out. When you talk to programmers, they initial days, almost 5, 6 years ago, there used to be a solid discussion or debate, you can say, that we have to use SOAP or RESTful. But today we can see that RESTful has proven its capability of security aspects and everything. So many people are tending to go with RESTful JSON objects to transact data from one system to another. And at the same time, we also have our Fire, which is completely built on RESTful concept. Okay, what is RESTful APIs? What is SOAP APIs? There is a lot of difference between them based on the state, session IDs, and all. But we will not get deeper into it. There is a specific reason why RESTful APIs is designed upon SOAP APIs. The last one that we have is database connections. So this is one of the other famous connections that we use alongside TCP/IP. TCP/IP was used to transact data between two different systems, right? But database connections will help us to connect to the database, grab the data from the database, and then generate an HL7 message and send out. So you may be given a blank EHR and you may be asked to go ahead and implement an orders interface from that. So you have to grab the EHR, figure out what all tables we need to get the data from, see where do you have to pick the data from for getting all the order data. Once you formulate your query, now you have to use that query within your Mirth Connect integration engine. Within that Mirth integration engine, you have to write that query, and Mirth should go ahead and connect to the database tables and pull that data out. Now that's where database connections come into play. When an external application like Mirth Connect should connect to the database, it is not that something you go ahead and connect just like that. Okay. The way you go ahead and connect to it is there will be an intermediary driver manager. Every database will have its own driver. And when you establish or when you invoke a connection from the application, you have to provide the database name, the URL to connect to database, the username and password to connect to database. And you have to provide them to the database driver. As I said, every database has its own driver. This is Microsoft SQL Server having its own driver, Oracle having its own driver. So if you're connecting to SQL Server, then this driver will go ahead and consume or take the data that you are providing, and this driver will help you to connect to the database. Okay, this is a mechanism with every database connection that you make. So this model is called as Open Connect Database, and drivers are all managed by Driver Manager in Windows. And every operating system has their own mechanism of how to manage these drivers. They are placed in a certain location and will be used for further accessibility. Even in Mirth Connect, we place all the drivers in one single location, and with all the databases that are supported, Mirth Connect can go and use them and connect to the any of the databases. So we'll talk about what all databases Mirth Connect supports in tomorrow's session. Okay. So any questions, guys, on various connection models? All right, I'm not hearing anything. So we'll conclude today's session here. We'll continue tomorrow with the Mirth Connect. So we'll be starting Mirth Connect tomorrow, and we'll start from basics because few of us are not from healthcare or integration background. So we'll have an application tour. Anyone aware of Mirth Connect? Did anyone work on Mirth Connect?
Dixon, yes, we are using Mirth, not
Okay.
extensively, but we
Mm-hmm.
have a few interfaces that
Okay.
are via Mirth.
Okay. Okay. All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, Jason, Suresh.
Yes,
So
Suresh.
currently with the new implementation of Fuji packs and RIS, we are
Mm-hmm.
using the Mirth Connect for the RIS.
Okay. You're about to start or you started?
No, we already started. We went live last week.
Okay. Great. Great. All right. So we have a couple of folks who are already aware of Mirth Connect. So, but most of us are not. So we will start from the basics. We'll first understand the um, application. So this is how Mirth Connect will look like once you log in. This is a dashboard where you'll see all the interfaces. I undeployed everything. That's the reason we are not seeing any interfaces here. So these are all the interfaces that we have. So this list is huge because I have been creating various channels for various purposes. But when you log in and when you install, you'll just be seeing few of them. So we'll have an application tour to understand how to navigate through the application. What is dashboard window? What is the importance of these headers? What is server log? What is connection log? What is global maps? Then we'll jump on to channels and then we'll understand about these windows. And then we'll start creating a channel and we'll see the process of how to create a channel and the way that we are going to execute this particular run through Mirth Connect is we'll create channel based on three connection models. Number one, we'll create a folder to folder connectivity and we'll transact an HL7 message through that process. Then we will go ahead and create TCP IP related connectivity and mimic some real-time scenarios like queuing the messages. What happens if the destination port is not running? What happens um, if once the message is errored out? How do you reprocess them? We'll also talk about once queued, what happens when the destination comes up all of a sudden. So we'll use some simulators for senders and receivers so that we can mimic these real-time scenarios. Then we will jump on to the third connection model, which is database related connection models. In database related connection models, we are going to connect to a dummy EHR database. So I've shared a dummy EHR with all of you through the training documents folder that is present on the drive. So you guys can go ahead and restore that if you already have SQL. If you don't have SQL, we'll see tomorrow how to install SQL. Couple of steps that you need to keep in mind while installing SQL that I want you to go through. So I will highlight them. And once you install SQL, you can restore that DB. So that's a sample EHR database which you can use to extract data, generate HL7 message and all. So we'll get into thorough process to understand how to pick up the data, how to transform it to HL7 and all. And then we'll also talk about interpreting an HL7 and writing it to the database. Okay, so this is all what we'll see. Along with that, we'll also talk about JavaScripting. I'll teach you JavaScripting to the extent that is necessary for Mirth Connect. Okay, all right, guys. So we'll conclude today's session here. Um, today's is pretty shorter session. We'll catch up tomorrow. You all have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.